Hey guys, Cam here from today's iPhone.com, and I have the iPhone 5 and the Galaxy S4. Of course, everyone wants to know how these things compare. I've had this for about 2 weeks. I've had this since September. So let's see how they compare in this probably two-part review comparison. Now, as you can see quite clearly from just looking at them, the Galaxy S4 is a much bigger phone. You can see it's wider, it's taller, and if you look on the sides here, it's ever so slightly thicker. Obviously, when you're holding it in hand, you're going to know that you've got a much more portable and much lighter phone in your hand with the iPhone 5, and some people might view that as a good thing. Some people might like the bigger phone. Now, one thing I will say, despite its much larger size, Samsung has done a good job of making sure that all the buttons and the ports are in easily accessible places. So for instance, the lock and power button is right where your thumb would be. Your volume button on the other side is really easy to get to with your index finger. And obviously you've got your home button here as well, which you can get to with your thumb. Now, in terms of actually reaching every part of the screen with one thumb, you can see my hands generally get most places apart from that far top corner there, but it is a 5-inch display, so that's to be expected. And whether you can consider that to be a bad or good thing, I don't know. I can't think of many times where I've had to stretch across to get there anyway, so I've not found it to be that big a deal. And in fact, the fact that it's so light and so slim actually does make it a lot easier to hold than what I was expecting. There's a really big difference in materials as well, and again, some people will have big issues with the fact that the Samsung's made of plastic. It has got a removable battery cover, which you see here. It's actually quite a flexible and bendy plastic, and this is obviously one of the most expensive phones on the market, and it's got this rather flimsy back cover on. I've not found in day-to-day use that it poses any issues or any durability problems. It does fine, and obviously it gives you access to your battery if you want to swap it out and replace it, or a micro SD card, which the iPhone doesn't. Some people still like to use those things. The iPhone is all one piece. You can see it's got aluminium on the back, a really nice anodized slate on the black one, and the white one's just got plain silver. And it's a lot more square, it's a lot more angular, all the edges are flat, with the nice rounded corners, which every phone seems to have these days. And obviously all the buttons you'll find, because they're made out of aluminium as well, you'll find that the buttons on the side are really, really solid, really easily to click. Very, very well made. And you know, personally, I do prefer the aluminium and the glass on the iPhone. That may not come as any surprise to you. Out of all the Android phones, the HTC One is most definitely my favourite just for that reason. I do prefer this more solid and sturdy unibody design, with cloud storage options increasing all the time, and with various other things. I genuinely do not see the need for micro SD cards and SD cards for anything other than SLR cameras anymore. So as much as I can understand why Samsung's gone this way, and it does feel great in hand, it does work well, it's not like it's a bad phone. I just think it could be better if it was a unibody design. Even if it was still plastic, I wouldn't mind so much. It's just that you can take off this rather flimsy battery cover that really doesn't do it for me. It's not a right or wrong thing, it's not one's better than the other, it's just I prefer metal and glass over the two pieces of plastic with a flimsy battery door. So that's just me. We're going to go on to the displays now, and really, if I'm completely 100% honest, there is no comparison. I mean, the 5-inch Super AMOLED display with 1080p resolution, or 1920 by 1080p, 441 pixels per inch on the Samsung, blows the iPhone away in absolutely every way. It's sharper, it's got better contrast ratios, it's obviously bigger, which makes watching films such as WALL-E much more immersive and easier to do because you're not looking at such a small display. And like I've said, because it's so big, you'd expect that it was a huge phone and uncomfortable to hold, but because of the really slim bezels and the neatly designed package, you actually don't feel like it's that big at all. Now, that's not to say that the iPhone's display isn't good, it is. It's just that for me, at the moment, I'm finding it a little bit too small. And when you start watching things like movies, for instance, obviously you get this letterboxing, which highlights even further just how non-media friendly it is almost. Now, one thing I did found about the iPhone is actually with its IPS display, you find that actually when you look to turn it to different angles, for instance, it doesn't really lose any of its quality. It doesn't lose any of its colour. You'll obviously see these lights reflecting on it because I've got lights set up here, but in day-to-day use, when you've got it set on your desk, as long as you've got no screen protectors or anything on there, you'll find that actually the iPhone's quality remains as you turn it. You don't lose anything by turning the screen. Whereas with the Samsung, and this is only a minor thing, you can see that actually when you tilt it slightly, you can see it starts to take on this ever so slightly blue tint. And it's not just when you turn it towards the light, it can be anyway. You turn it away from the angle that you're looking straight at it and you can see it starts to look a little bit blue. That's not a big deal, it's not really going to affect you in day to day, it's just a really tiny minor issue. All in all, I found that the iPhone isn't as good in daylight, it's generally not as good as the Samsung's display anyway. So all in all, if I was going to award a winner for the display, it's a rather easy decision to make. The Samsung's 5-inch display is just fantastic. Whether you're looking at images or watching video, whether you're just checking emails, everything looks really, really good on there. And the added contrast, the added vividity of the colours, all that stuff just adds together to make a really stunning display. Now I want to move on to cameras now. The iPhone, if you want to talk megapixels, which really doesn't make a huge amount of difference, this one's got 8 megapixels, your Galaxy has got about 13 megapixels, but you can change settings and stuff to change resolutions. Now I did do a more in-depth camera comparison, so I'm just going to quickly go over this again. What I found was that in daylight, you find that actually the results are different, but they both produce really great quality images. Now the iPhone tends to add a filter, makes everything seem a little bit more toned down. I wouldn't say it adds sepia to the images, but it does add a less vivid colour. I mean, you can see on here, you've got, this is with the flash on. Now what I did was I went out in low light conditions as well, so I put the flash on. You can see the flash on the Samsung does light things up a lot more evenly, but generally in low light the iPhone did actually perform much better. You can see the detail in the iPhone, it was a lot smoother. The image on the Samsung was very, very grainy indeed when you've had it in auto mode, but the Samsung does actually have a night mode on it which you can put on. But then again, with the iPhone you can have an app like KitCam or Camera Awesome or any of those photography apps where you can tweak settings within the app to basically achieve the same thing. But in default mode you can see that's the same image. This is in night mode. This is without night mode on. This is just with auto. So you find in auto mode that actually the iPhone is a lot better. Now in terms of which one's better, it's hard to say. I mean, I couldn't separate them really in the test. There's nothing that I can do on the Samsung that I couldn't do on the iPhone with an app, for instance. There's nothing that I can get on an iPhone that I can't achieve on the Samsung. So all in all, it's pretty good. Both of them are good. You're not really going to miss out by having one over the other in this instance. What I did find was the Galaxy did excel actually when you were taking pictures of grass or flowers or anything in nature. Because it wasn't filtering out the colours, you could see the greens still keep their vivid colour. And it's something that I showed. Now this is quite a good example of what I'm trying to talk about here, is that actually the greens are very vivid on the Samsung, but then you don't get a lot of depth in the colour when you look at the wood and the grain on the wood. When you compare that to the iPhone, you can see that actually there's a lot more brown, a lot more kind of colour in the brown and the bricks around the crates here on the floor. You get a lot more variety in colour. It's not just too contrasty, if you see what I mean. There's a good range of shadow and light and brightness and exposure. It does it very evenly, whereas the Samsung tends to be a tiny little bit harsh, but then that's what Snapseed and Photoshop are for. All in all, I really do like the natural element to the iPhone camera. It does produce really natural looking images, whereas the Samsung seems to hyper-realize everything, so it'll make colours really vivid and it make the images really sharp, which might be a good thing. And it does look fantastic on the display, and I can't say which one I prefer the most. If I had a Galaxy S4, I would not be complaining about the images. likewise with the iPhone, I don't find myself wanting to complain, so I would say they're fairly equal on that front. You might think differently, but I don't think there's that much in between them.